Hey everyone, Cora Miller here. Welcome to Unsaid Things, where we step into the quietest corners of the soul, where life-altering decisions are made without making a sound. If you're ready for a journey to find your true self, hit that subscribe button and let's begin. The phone call came at 5:15 in the morning. I was standing on the platform at Gary Station in Indiana. My single canvas duffel bag was at my feet, and a green tin of Earl Grey tea was tucked tightly under my arm. The October air in an old industrial town smelled of heavy frost, mixed with the faint scent of wood smoke drifting from somewhere across the river. Amtrak Train 48, heading north, was already visible at the far end of the track, its dim yellow headlights cutting through the gray mist as it rumbled toward me. The phone rang. I looked at the screen. Silas Miller, my father. I let it ring twice, then finally picked up at 5:18. "I don't believe you actually have the guts to get on that train, Cora," he said, his voice thick and raspy, yet still carrying that heavy, demanding weight. "I'm standing on the platform waiting for it right now, Dad," I replied, forcing my voice to remain steady. The silence that followed lasted exactly 4 seconds. I counted every single one. "Running away at your age," he ganned his teeth, "is a reckless, impulsive stunt. Only cowards walk out on their responsibilities." I didn't answer him right away. I watched the massive train slow down as it pulled into the station at 5:22, its low diesel vibration shaking the concrete platform beneath my boots. A woman in a worn-out, heavy canvas work jacket dragged a battered rolling suitcase past me. A man with a local newspaper tucked under his arm nodded at a void of nothingness. "The train is boarding now, Dad. It doesn't stop here for long." "Cora, you listen to me very carefully." His voice dropped into that cold, sharp register he used when he wanted to enforce his authority, as though I hadn't spent 63 years understanding exactly when he was giving an order. "No one in the Miller family has ever turned their back on this town. Your grandfather built his life here, and your Uncle Harold did too. Nobody just packs up and deserts their family like this." "I know the history, Dad," I said. "Then why are you dragging this family's name through the mud?" It wasn't a question. With Silas, every word he spoke was a final verdict. I picked up my canvas duffel. The conductor was making her way down the platform. "The train is moving. Goodbye, Dad." I slid the phone into my coat pocket. It began ringing violently again before I'd even taken 3 steps. I didn't look at it. I showed the conductor my ticket, the paper one I'd printed out at the library a week ago, because I didn't trust myself not to cancel a digital booking during a midnight moment of weakness. I stepped up into the car as the clock struck 5:30 a.m. Dad called twice more while I was finding a seat. I watched the platform through the smudged, grimy glass window, the empty concrete, the single orange light bulb flickering above the shelter, and I thought to myself, so this is what it looks like to leave a place you've been circling for 30 years. Then the train moved, and the station disappeared into the dark. I opened the green tin, brewing myself a cup of tea with a small electric travel kettle I'd packed into the mesh pocket of my duffel. I sat there, wrapping both of my rough, 63-year-old hands around the white porcelain mug with the chipped handle, and quietly watched the rust-colored smokestacks of Indiana fade away outside the window. Some truths you come to slowly, like an old house settling into the ground. Others you realize all at once, after years of not noticing that the foundation had cracked a long time ago. I am Cora Miller. I was 63 years old on the morning I took the train from the industrial town of Gary to the port city of Duluth, Minnesota, with nothing but a single bag and no forwarding note left on the kitchen table. I had been a school librarian for 31 years at a poor, underfunded public elementary school. The kind of librarian who remembered not just which books the kids liked, but which ones they needed, which is a completely different thing entirely. I retired last summer, 15 months before this story properly starts. Retirement was supposed to be the beginning of something of my own, a real garden, not just the 4 pots of marigolds sitting on the back porch. A reading chair that wasn't constantly piled with clothes waiting to be ironed. Time to finish the quilt I'd started years ago, but instead, retirement became this. Just more hours in the day for my family to demand things from me. My parents lived 11 minutes away in the old wood-framed house where I'd grown up. My father, Silas, had never once considered selling it because letting go of that house meant admitting the world had changed and that he had changed with it. And Silas Miller did not change. He was 81 years old. In his own mind, he was still the foreman of something, the family, the house, the supreme version of reality in which everyone was grateful and no one ever wanted to leave. My mother, Martha, was 78. She had a bad hip that desperately needed replacing, an apple pie recipe she'd been refining since 1987, and an absolutely unshakable belief that the correct response to any crisis was to gather everyone around a modest dinner table at 6 p.m. and talk it through. The fatal flaw in her philosophy, as I'd been attempting to explain for several decades, was that talking it through required someone on the other end who was actually capable of listening. My older sister Agnes was 67. She lived 4 blocks away from my parents. Ever since her bitter divorce 2 years ago, she had taken to spending almost all her time at the house, organizing the family the way she organized her cramped kitchen, alphabetically, her preferences first, and God help the soul who dared to move a spice jar out of place. I want to be very careful with how I say this, because I've told this story to my friend Ruth over plates of pasta in Duluth, and she asked me the same question. Were they cruel to you? And the honest answer is, not exactly. What they were was relentless. They were completely impermeable to the idea that I might have a different center of gravity, a life of my own, separate from the exact coordinate they had assigned me. They were so thoroughly convinced that the family was a fixed, immovable object, and that I was a permanent point within it, that it never once crossed their minds to ask what I might be doing with the hours between the times they needed me. The cruelty came in very small packages, repeated over years until they were worn smooth with use. You've always been the capable one, Cora. We depend on you. The doctor wants your father to avoid stress. You know how he gets when you're not there to manage things. It would mean everything if you just came home to help out. Come home. As though I'd been somewhere else all this time. The thing that broke the camel's back wasn't a massive explosion. It was a mundane Tuesday in March, 7 months before I bought that train ticket. I'd been at my parents' house since 10 in the morning, going through an old wooden box on Silas's dresser. I spent hours sorting out factory insurance papers, expired appliance warranties, and a 1974 photograph of my mother in a polka dot dress, standing in front of an old Ford I didn't even recognize. Silas had suddenly decided he needed his affairs in order, and I was the only one he trusted to do the labor. Agnes had offered to help, but Silas snapped that he wanted Cora. It was a pattern I'd recognized decades ago, but had never successfully dismantled. By 2 in the afternoon, I had sorted dozens of individual documents into neatly labeled folders, located an old insurance policy Silas swore didn't exist, and been asked 3 separate times if I was going to stay and cook dinner. I didn't play the part of the obedient daughter that day. I didn't stay for dinner. I told them I had other plans. My mother looked at me with an expression she'd been perfecting since I was 19, a heavy mix of worry, mild offense, and absolute certainty that whatever plans I had were entirely trivial compared to this family's immediate needs. And she said, "Well, if you absolutely must go." I drove back to my house in the rusty old sedan I'd owned for 11 years. I sat in my own driveway, staring at the steering wheel for exactly 9 minutes before going inside. I was tired in a way that sleep couldn't fix. It was the deep, hollow exhaustion of a person who has been useful for so long that they have completely forgotten who they were before everyone else started demanding a piece of them. I went inside. I brewed a cup of Earl Grey tea in the green tin I'd bought at a market years ago, the one with the small sailing ship painted on the side and a dent on the corner. I sat at my kitchen table, and a thought hit me. Something is going to have to change. It wasn't a new thought. It was the exact same whisper I'd been shoving to the back of my mind for 15 years, only to set it aside because there was always a family emergency. Silas's old surgery, Martha slipping on the winter ice, or the time their furnace gave out and I spent 4 freezing days managing repairmen while trying to finish a library grant. Something is going to have to change. The only difference on that March Tuesday was that I didn't push the whisper away. I called Ruth that night at 7:12. She answered on the second ring. Ruth and I had been friends since we were 22. She had moved up to the port city of Duluth a few years back. She had a small guest room she'd been begging me to use for a long time. She taught a community pottery class on Thursday mornings, and she was the only person whose company left me feeling a little more like myself. "I've been thinking," I told her, "about what you said regarding Duluth." There was a brief pause on the line, and then she asked, "How serious are you?" "I don't know yet," I answered, "but serious enough that I'm saying it out loud to you." "Then come visit," she said. "Come see what it feels like." I went in April for 7 days. I slept in Ruth's guest room and walked along the shore of Lake Superior in the early mornings with a warm cup of coffee. I ate dinner at her table and rediscovered a sense of peace I thought I'd lost forever. On the 5th day, I found a tiny one-bedroom apartment on a quiet working-class street. It had a large bay window, 2 small closets, and an old radiator that clicked rhythmically at night. The rent fit perfectly within my modest pension. The landlord told me it would be vacant on November 1st. I told him I'd think about it. I thought about it for 11 days. Then I called him back and said yes. I didn't tell a single soul in my family. This is the part people ask me about the most when I tell this story. Why didn't you tell them? The answer is simple. I knew exactly what would happen if I did. I'd watched it happen with much smaller things. The week I went away for a short seminar and came back to dozens of panicked voicemails. The year I decided not to cook for the holidays, and my father refused to look at me for 3 weeks. Or the time my mother said, in that heavy, passive-aggressive tone, "I didn't realize you had so much time for your own hobbies." My family had a twisted talent for turning a personal decision into a betrayal against the household. And this decision, the biggest one I'd made in 30 years, the one that belonged entirely to me, I wasn't going to let them dissect it. I didn't want it debated over a dramatic dinner. I didn't want to walk into a room feeling like I already owed everyone an apology. So, I chose silence. Instead, I quietly arranged the sale of my small house. Over the course of 6 weeks, I slowly moved my books and my most cherished keepsakes into Ruth's spare room, carrying them in old canvas grocery bags. I sorted my entire life into 3 piles: what to bring, what to store, and what to let go. The 4 pots of marigolds I decided to keep. They sat tightly in the footwell of my car on a late October afternoon when I made my final trip. I left them on Ruth's back porch. The brass key I left on the hook in my kitchen. My grandmother's old cast iron skillet I took with me. The night before the train, at 3:15 in the morning, I was sitting on the bare floor of my empty bedroom, packing the last of my clothes into the canvas duffel. The room was hollow. The dresser was bare, and my old leather journal was zipped into the bag. I stopped folding. I sat there holding a gray cardigan, and I thought about Silas's demanding voice on the phone that I hadn't called yet. I thought about Martha's apple pie, and the way she would slide a slice across the table before asking for a favor, as if sweetness was a mandatory preamble. I thought about Agnes, who had never once asked me what I wanted without immediately lecturing me on what I should want instead. I wondered, am I wrong? Not wrong for leaving exactly, but wrong for doing it so quietly. Wrong for not giving them one last chance to react differently? The radiator clicked loudly in the empty room. You may owe the world your kindness, but you absolutely do not owe anyone your life. That sentence had been echoing in my head for a month. It felt undeniably true at 3 a.m., sitting on a bare floor with a duffel bag and 63 years of being the thou vat one. I didn't stop. I finished packing, set my alarm for 4:50 a.m., lay down on the mattress with my coat draped over me, and slept for a little while. When I finally boarded that train, it felt astonishingly ordinary. I had expected a grand cinematic moment, either massive drama or a numbing paralysis. Instead, all I got was the smell of the damp platform, the conductor's mundane voice, and the small, heavy relief of a paper ticket already settled in my pocket. Everything was decided. I found a window seat, made my tea, and watched the industrial smokestacks of Gary vanish into the fog. The Midwestern countryside in October is a stark kind of beautiful. All vibrant oranges and deep yellows, turning brittle and brown at the edges. It's the color of something ending into something else that hasn't quite begun yet. Throughout that morning, Silas called 4 consecutive times, at 6:15, 7:30, just before 9, and one final time at 11 a.m. I let all 4 go straight to voicemail. Agnes called once in the early afternoon, leaving a brief message. I would listen to it later. Martha didn't call at all. She never called directly when she was angry. The train pulled into Duluth at 4:30 in the afternoon. Ruth was standing on the platform, holding 2 warm coffees in a paper carrier. She didn't ask me how I was holding up. She just wrapped her arms around me in a tight embrace. You made it, she said. I made it, I replied. We drove through the port city as the sun began to set. I watched the streets slide past and thought, so this is what it feels like to arrive somewhere completely on purpose. They found out 3 days later. I had left the brass key hidden under the middle marigold pot, the one closest to the front door, because leaving it inside felt too cold, and leaving no key at all felt too hostile. I had sent a typed letter to Silas and Martha from Ruth's kitchen table. The letter was brief. I have moved to Duluth. I am safe and well. I will be in touch when I am ready. I love you, Cora. Agnes was the first to drive over around 5 p.m. that evening when she couldn't reach me. She found an empty driveway, barren rooms visible through the front glass window, and the hidden key. She called our parents. Agnes's son told me later during a private call, Mom just stood there staring at your empty kitchen for a long time, Aunt Cora. She didn't say a single word. She looked like she was frantically rewinding her memory, searching for the exact moment you decided to betray us. The truth is, there wasn't a single moment of betrayal. There were 30 years of moments. It was the morning I drove through a blinding February ice storm just to sit with Silas in a public hospital waiting room. where he didn't even need me, just because he said he was anxious. And when I finally arrived, freezing and exhausted, he merely waved me off toward a chair like I was a piece of furniture he had prearranged. It was every single holiday where I broke my back cooking in the kitchen, while Agnes criticized the tablecloth size, and Mother constantly managed my cleaning. It was the year I had to drop my art class because they had an emergency and kept calling, waiting passively for me to sacrifice my time. There were all those moments. None of them was the catalyst, but together, they were the flood. Mother called me on the Thursday after I arrived, right at 11:20 in the morning. A real call, not through Dad. "How could you cut your own family off like this, Cora?" "Because if I had told you beforehand, you would have found a way to turn my choice into a crime," I answered. She was quiet for a long moment. "Generations of this family stayed and fought through the hard times together. Your father never abandoned the factory, and your grandfather never ran away. We live for each other. Have you forgotten that?" "I haven't forgotten, Mom," I said. "Then why throw us away?" "Mom," I said, my voice slow and deliberate, "I didn't leave because I hate you. I left because I need to find out who Cora is when there is no longer a single burden or demand pressing down on her shoulders." Another long silence. "That is a deeply selfish thing to say," she whispered, her voice wounded. "If that's how you see it, then I accept it," I replied. I hung up the phone without offering a single apology or further explanation. For the first time in my life, I refused to carry the guilt they handed me. The consequences came in waves. In the first few weeks, there were the voicemails from Silas that I chose not to save. By the third week, I finally moved into my apartment in Duluth. I stood in the empty room with its fresh white plaster walls, watching the afternoon sun gleam across the freezing waters of Lake Superior. I felt something far more specific than happiness. It felt like a room that was the exact right size for one person. I placed my 4 pots of marigolds on the bay window ledge, and they bloomed beautifully. By the 3rd month, Silas called me on a weekend evening. His voice had changed. The harsh foreman bark was gone, replaced by something much quieter. He said, "Your mother isn't doing well, Cora. She's been very fragile lately." "I'll call and talk to her, Dad," I said. "And once the winter breaks, I'll arrange a trip to come visit." "She'd really like that," he sighed. And then, after a long, heavy hesitation, he whispered, "Just tell me one thing." "What exactly did we do so wrong to make you run?" The loyalty of parents to their old, comfortable patterns is rarely the same as their loyalty to their children's right to be free. I thought that, but I didn't say it out loud. What I said was, "You didn't do one wrong thing, Dad. I had just lived for everyone else for a very long time, and it was time for me to go." He didn't argue with that. We talked about the brutal lake effect weather for a few minutes, and then we said goodbye. He called me Cora when he hung up, using my simple name rather than the formal, heavy full name he reserved for punishments. I counted that as progress. The chance meeting happened the following April, when I had to return to our old town around 1 p.m. to sign some final paperwork for the house sale. The house had been sold to a young, working-class couple. I was walking out of the local grocery store when I ran directly into Agnes. We both froze. She was wearing that same faded blue coat I'd seen for years, and her hair had turned far more silver than I remembered. "Cora," she said, her voice genuinely stunned. "Hi, Agnes," I replied. We stood there on the soot-stained sidewalk, just looking at each other. "You look lighter, Cora," she said. "You look well too, Agnes," I answered. Then she looked down and asked, If you aren't in a rush, could we sit down for a minute? We sat in a small diner down the street. She placed a small paper bag of scones on the table and looked at me, the sharp, judgmental edge completely gone from her eyes. I've been thinking a lot about what you said before you left, about wanting to know who you are when nobody needs you anymore. To be honest, I was furious at the time, and I couldn't comprehend it. But lately, she stopped, her eyes drifting to the paper bag. I realized that I've never done that either. I've never found out. I've just been stuck here, moving from one chore to the next, fixing everyone else's lives and forgetting my own. I kept silent. This was completely uncharted territory with Agnes, and I didn't want to say the wrong thing and disrupt this rare, honest moment. I still don't think it was right of you to slip away in the middle of the night without a word, she said, her voice softening. It was incredibly hard on us, Cora. Genuinely hard. But I'm finally starting to understand why you had to do it. We sat with that truth between us. How is it up there? She asked. Duluth. It's peaceful, Agnes, I smiled. I'm actually taking a community pottery class. She laughed, a real, genuine laugh that crinkled the corners of her eyes. I hadn't made my sister laugh like that in decades. Pottery, she mused. I'm terrible at it, I joked. I made a bowl last week that looks like a deflated hat. Ruth's daughter actually took a photo of it and framed it. She laughed again, opening the paper bag and sliding a scone across the table to me without asking if I wanted one. We talked for 40 minutes. I visited my parents that May. I chose to stay at a small motel down by the station rather than my old bedroom, and Mother accepted that boundary with far more grace than I ever expected. Silas shook my hand when I arrived, a quiet, solemn acknowledgement between two independent adults establishing a brand new relationship. Mother baked her signature apple pie. We sat at the worn wooden kitchen table, the exact same table where I used to do my homework as a little girl, the one with the faint burn mark from candles at Agnes's birthday party in 1978. We drank coffee, ate pie, and talked about my apartment in Duluth, my messy pottery class, and how the young couple was now planting a small vegetable garden in my old backyard. At one point, Silas looked up and asked about the marigolds. I took them with me, Dad, I said. He nodded slowly. Your mother planted those. I know, I said. They're sitting right on my window ledge, and they're doing beautifully. He nodded again, turning his gaze back down to his coffee cup. Some families hold on to each other by pretending that nothing has ever changed. Others hold on to each other by learning, very slowly, to recognize and accept what has. I don't know which kind of family mine will turn out to be yet. I am 63 years old, and I finally learned never to assume I know exactly how a story is going to end. What I know for certain is this. On the morning of October 19th, I stood on a rusted platform with a tin of Earl Grey, a canvas duffel, and a paper ticket. And I got on that train. It was hard. In many ways, it is still incredibly hard. The family dinners I miss, the phone calls I intentionally keep short, and the constant awareness that Dad is 81 and our time is not an unlimited resource. But right now, I am sitting in my own apartment overlooking the gray waters of Duluth. The large bay window is right behind me, and the 4 pots of marigolds are soaking up the afternoon sun. My journal is open beside me. Last Thursday, I finally made a bowl in my pottery class that was perfectly round on one side and completely flat on the other. Ruth's daughter looked at it and said it looked like a hat that had finally made a choice for itself. And I think that's just about right. Some doors you close with your own hands, Others close themselves, and you're just there to notice. And then, I got on the train. I hope this story gave you meaningful moments to reflect on. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video to support the channel. Stay tuned for more powerful audio dramas on Unsaid Things. See you next time!